Within the pages of this book are the principles of how a singular factor can be used to transform every African nation from a third world to a first world nation. This factor is the factor of time. Time is the greatest wealth that everybody has and the only resource that every nation has in equal amount. This wealth of time is actually of more value than natural resources, petroleum, gold, diamond, gas, etc. The resource of time is the ultimate resource, and you are about to learn why and how. Time can be used as a factor of economic regeneration for Africa and Nigeria in particular. This book also explains how our GDP could be doubled in a very short time just by recognizing the value of this singular factor of time. Although time can be used as a factor for economic regeneration, yet it has been wasted in the continent of Africa as though it is of no value. It is common knowledge that there is no other part of the world where time is more viciously squandered as on the continent of Africa. 1. It doesn't matter how much we complain about the poor state of things in Africa or how much we blame other nations for our woes. Until we solve the problem of time wastage in Africa, we will keep depending on developed nations for help, and we will not be able to turn our nations into first world nations. It is my belief that this is not the time to wallow in self-pity and constantly depend on the first world nations for financial aid year after year. No, it is a time to take the bull by the horn by laying hold of our wealth of time and building a first world nation with it. That is the essence of this book. This book offers the solution to the problem of time wastage in Africa. The answer is here, the solution is well outlined here. There is no excuse anymore to remain a third world and an economically poor nation. We can become first world nations. All we need to do is to discover the secrets of first world nations that are revealed in this book, and apply the principles upon which they are built and use them to turn our nations into first world nations. Chapter 1. Understanding the Wealth of Nations. Nations of the world. At a time, we're grouped into three classes which were called First World countries, Second World countries and Third World countries. The term First World originally refers to the capitalist, industrialized countries within the Western European and United States sphere of influence. Nations with the most advanced economy, highest standard of living, the most advanced technology, the greatest influence in the world are called First World countries. Among such nations are Sweden, Germany, Norway, Canada, Ireland, United States of America, United Kingdom, Netherlands, Australia, France, and other developed countries of the world. The surprising reality, however, is that no African country is currently among the first 30 developed nations of the world. Africa is the backward and least developed of all continents. African countries are among the poorest and underdeveloped nations of the world that are collectively called third world nations. Why are we not among the first world countries? What are the criteria to becoming a first world nation? These are the questions this book seeks to answer. I have written this book to show practical steps on how every African country can become a first world country. We shall start this journey by looking at the idea of the wealth of nations. All nations are equally wealthy. Dear readers, can you imagine waking up this morning and credited to your account is $86,400 United States dollars? However, you only have 24 hours to spend it. Just like the biblical manna from heaven, this blessing works by the same principle. By the time you go back to bed 12 midnight, whatever money you have not spent would be wiped out off your account. By 6 a.m. the next morning you will be credited with another $86,400 United States dollars, and at 12 midnight your account will again be emptied. That is exactly the amount of wealth God gives to each and every one of us on a daily basis, irrespective of our country of residence. 2. God has made the provision for every man on earth to be equally endowed with this currency. So in actual fact every human being is equally wealthy according to God's divine providence. And not only that, but all nations are also equally wealthy. This is because in every nation of the world, this amount of wealth is freely available. The wealth I am referring to is the wealth of time squared. It is the only wealth every human being comes to the earth with. We are all endowed with it equally. Everybody that is born on the surface of this earth has this wealth. And every nation that exists on the earth has equal amount of this wealth irrespective of its location on the world map. Being rich is having money, being wealthy is having time. Margaret Bonanno. Looking at the quote above, you would realize that the wealth of nations is dependent on time. Every nation is therefore wealthy because of the resource of time that they have. Therefore, the prosperity of any nation will depend largely upon what its citizens do with this wealth of time that they have equally. This means that the richest countries in the world are those who have been able to harness this wealth of time to their advantage. The nations that are regarded as developed nations are those who have been able to convert this wealth of time into a high GDP, a high Human Development Index, a high educational standard and world-class industries. A country is referred to as a first world nation only if that country has been able to use time wisely to build a highly developed economy and an advanced technological infrastructure. A country is regarded as a developed country when it is highly industrialized, has a high standard of living and a high per capita income. You may be wondering what time has got to do with the development of nations. Well, it is imperative for me to first enlighten you on the value of time. Time is the greatest resource in the world. It is the resource from which all other resources come and depend. In fact, everything that we see today came out of time. The good roads, the skyscrapers, the factories, the technological devices, the hospitals, schools, laboratories, libraries, etc. are all products of time. None of the above listed infrastructures came into existence without men and women first investing time into building it. No infrastructure will exist in a nation if the citizens of that nation had not invested time to build it. It took some number of years, months, days, hours, minutes and seconds for any of the infrastructures you see in developed nations to be built. That is to say, it is time that decides whether a nation will be a first world nation or not. To make it easier to grasp, I will like to put it this way: it is what every nation does with the resource of time that will determine how developed that nation will become. Hence, we could say that since every nation has been given this wealth of time equally, they all therefore have equal chance to become first world nations. Take Singapore for example. Singapore became an independent republic in the year 1965 after being ejected from Malaysia. Lee Kuan Yew became the prime minister from 1959 to 1990. During his administration, he was able to solve the problem of unemployment which had been a national challenge years before. He also made sure that the standard of living of Singaporeans was raised to the extent that the citizens themselves testified of it. He established a housing scheme that made it possible for almost every Singaporean to own their own homes. He increased the GDP of the country by developing her economic infrastructure. He turned violence and racial tension into a thing of the past and built an independent national defense system. By the end of the 20th century, Singapore had transformed from a developing nation to a first world nation. It happened in such a way that the citizens themselves were amazed at how fast their nation grew to become a first world nation. On the other hand, Nigeria became a republic in the year 1963. That was 2 years before Singapore became a republic. 55 years after we became a republic, we are still a third world nation and a developing nation. Nigeria is still one of the poorest countries in the world even though she became a republic before Singapore. Researchers have done a research to compare Singapore and Nigeria on certain indexes and this was what they found. Singapore's GDP per capita was $90,531 in 2017. Nigeria's GDP per capita was $5,927 in 2017. Singapore's unemployment rate was at 2.2% in 2017, while Nigeria's unemployment rate was at 18.8% in the same year, to the power of 4. Dear friends, what do you think is the reason for the huge difference in the economic growth rate of the two countries above? The difference is in what each country did with the wealth of time they've had since they both became independent republics till now. Singapore evolved from a third world to a first world country thanks to what they've done with their wealth of time since 1965. How was Lee Kuan Yew able to turn Singapore into a first world nation? He did it by making every citizen understand that time must be used productively. When he first came into office as Prime Minister, the Singaporeans were a lazy people. They hated work and enjoyed wasting time on frivolities just like most Africans do today. However, the Prime Minister had to lead them with an iron hand. He forced them to work hard by converting time into products. He taught them how to be disciplined with time. The citizens gradually adapted to the strict rules on work and time until it became a habit for them to work productively with their time. It was thanks to this habit of hard work and proper use of time that Singapore was able to transform from a third world to a first world country. Nigeria, on the other hand, is still a developing nation after 57 years of independence because we do not know how to use time for productive work. It was what Nigeria did with her God-given wealth of time since 1963 till date that is responsible for the economic state we've found ourselves in. What have we done with our wealth of time? We have wasted it on irrelevant activities. We have not used it to build factories and industrialize our nation. We have not taught our people how to use time productively, and the result of our time wastage is reflected in the economic recession that we are faced with. Therefore, a nation's growth and development are dependent upon what she does with her wealth of time. This is true for every nation, irrespective of geographical location and natural resources. It is for this reason that I have dedicated this book to every African nation to bring to light the secrets of great nations and to show my people how every African nation can become a first world nation just by taking advantage of the wealth of time that they freely have. Whether we like it or not, at the end of the day, every nation is equally wealthy because all nations have been given $86,400 worth of time daily. And what each nation does with this wealth determines how prosperous and developed that nation becomes. Natural resources mean little compared to time. Ladies and gentlemen, this wealth of time is actually of more value than natural resources, petroleum, gold, diamond, gas, etc. It is the only wealth that is more valuable than human resources. The resource of time is the ultimate resource. Time is the ultimate wealth. Any country may have one or all of the following wealth or resources. 1. Oil, natural gas, timber and coal. 2. Gold, diamond, iron, aluminum, lead. 3. Land, water, air. 4. Human resources. All of these resources are freely abundant in nature and could be used to turn any nation into a prosperous nation if properly harnessed. However, all of these resources mean little or nothing without the proper use of the wealth of time. A country could be full of all the natural and human resources, but if that country fails to understand and make proper use of the wealth of time, she stands to remain a poor and an underdeveloped nation. That is why the resource of time is one of the greatest resources in the world. You may ask, how could time be more valuable than human resource? Oh yay! The reason is because a human resource is limited to the duration of her lifespan, while time is unlimited. Human resources could be purchased and sold, but not time. Once lost, it can never be regained. The value of time is only equal to the value of life. As a matter of fact, life itself is measured by time. Time therefore is the measurement of life. Do you love life? Then don't waste time. 1. Dost thou love life? Then do not squander time, for that's the stuff that life is made of. Benjamin Franklin. Time is not only the measurement of life but also the only commodity in life that cannot be bought, sold, borrowed, given out as a gift, and cannot be inherited. Therefore, to truly become a great nation or a first world nation, every African country must first understand the wealth of time. The following chapters of this book will reveal how Africa can convert this wealth of time into economic growth, national development, abundant food supply, and national prosperity. Have you wondered why Nigeria is one of the richest countries in terms of crude oil and yet she is one of the poorest countries in the world economically? Have you wondered why Nigeria is a country with a population of about 195 million people and yet has a far lower GDP than Singapore with a population of about 5.7 million people? The reasons are not far-fetched. It is because we do not understand the wealth of time that we have. We have a large human resource, but most of these people are ignorant of the value and wealth of time. Africans generally have not been thoroughly taught how to use the wealth of time to convert all other resources into economic prosperity for our continent and our individual nations. We are a blessed continent full of natural resources, but our lack of understanding and judicious use of time has kept us in a poor and beggarly state. For example, some of the most sought-after mineral resources in the world are deposited in Democratic Republic of. We are a blessed continent full of natural resources, but our lack of understanding and judicious use of time has kept us in a poor and we are a blessed continent full of natural resources, but our lack of understanding and judicious use of time has kept us in a poor and beggarly state. For example, some of the most sought-after mineral resources in the world are deposited in Democratic Republic of Congo, and yet they are still among the poorest and economically backward nations of the world. That is to further buttress the point that mineral resources worth only little if the resource of time is poorly understood. It was even reported that the amount of mineral resources deposited in the land in Democratic Republic of Congo is worth $24 trillion. Dear friends, can you believe it? $24 trillion worth of mineral resources buried in one country. That is more than the total GDP of United States, China, Japan, Germany, and United Kingdom all put together. The total GDP of 5 out of the top 10 countries with the highest GDP in the world is as shown below. United States equals $20,351 billion. China equals $12,796 billion. Japan equals $4,951 billion. Germany total equals $44,153 billion. The result shows that Dr. Congo has deposited mineral resources that is worth more than the GDP of USA, China, Japan, Germany, and United Kingdom put together. And yet the country is still poor and underdeveloped. This is a tragedy, and it is a result of Africa's lack of understanding of time and failure to use it for economic productivity. That is why I said natural mineral resources are of no value in a country if the citizens of that country will not invest their time to harness and process them. Time is the greatest resources. The first world nations of the world understand this and pay much attention to the use of time for productive purposes, hence their high GDP. While Drive, Congo, because of lack of understanding of time and how to use it to harness natural resources, has a very low GDP and is a third world nation. From the foregoing, we could infer that if Dr. Congo learns to use the wealth of time to effectively harness its natural resources, it could be more developed, economically richer and more powerful than the United States, China, Japan, Germany and United Kingdom combined. But as long as Africa keep trivializing time and wasting it for non-productive activities, the first world nations will keep leading the world while we on the other hand will get poorer and poorer. It is not enough to just have abundant natural resources. Time must be understood and taken advantage of to convert those natural resources into economic value if we truly desire to become first world nations. The nature of the wealth of time. Before I delve into details in telling you how the wealth of time can be used to turn every African country into a first world nation, I would first like you to understand the nature of time. Concerning the riddle I gave above about the amount of $86,400 being deposited in your account daily, this is the reality. Here is its unveiling. The $86,400 United States dollars I mentioned above is actually the amount of seconds we all have in a day. That is the amount of seconds God credits each and every one of us daily. But when you go to bed it is wiped out and you get another one credited to you when you wake up. The only difference is in the analogy I gave above. I refer to the figure 86,400 as if it were in US dollars. But in the real sense it is much more serious than that. It is not USD that has been jeopardized on daily basis, it is actually 86,400 seconds of your life. You are given that amount of wealth every day in time, not in dollars. That amount of time is to be converted into some products, benefits, goods, services, welfare, ministry, but most of us actually truncate this amount of wealth on daily basis. 1. I could stand on a busy corner, hat in hand, and beg people to throw me all their wasted hours. Bernard Berenson. There is no other continent in the world that wastes time as much as Africa does. The wealth of time we waste in Africa is worth much more than all the natural resources we have on the continent. The slow rate of development in almost every sector of Nigeria, for example, could attest to the fact that Africans do not know how to invest time and convert it into products for economic growth and national prosperity. The fact that we are in economic recession despite our huge wealth of natural resources is an indication of how much time we waste in Nigeria. The underdevelopment and high rate of poverty in any country is a result of how poorly the citizens of that country understand the value of time. One would have thought that with the huge amount of natural resources we would have indigenous industries and factories all over the nook and cranny of our nation. Unfortunately, the exact opposite is what is obtainable. Little or no factories, no indigenous gold mining companies, no indigenous petrol refineries and no cocoa and palm oil production companies. That is one reason why our citizens are not in the factories in large numbers converting time into various products. It is because we do not understand the wealth of time. The developed nations of the world have an understanding of the wealth of time. Take Japan for example. They are very productive with time. They are always working with the wealth of time that they have. It is on record that the Japanese have one of the highest working hours in the world. Most Japanese work up to 60 hours per week. They are always in the factories or at the office converting their time into products for economic benefit. It is a thing of pride for a typical Japanese to work for long hours. They literally work themselves to death. They are highly industrious and have respect for time. It is customary for Japanese to be punctual. As Japanese are especially concerned about not being late, most have naturally acquired this habit. For example, in companies and public institutions, and for meetings with others. It is considered common sense to be prompt. Japanese people arrive for meetings at least 15 minutes before the agreed time. If a train arrives even 1 minute later than scheduled, Japanese railway companies announce their apologies over the public address system, to the power of 5. I am not surprised that Japan is a leading world nation. It is thanks to their understanding of time. Japan is the third largest economy in the world, just behind the US and China. They are also the fourth largest export market. The first three are US, China, and Germany. Japan is said to be among the most advanced countries in the world in every respect, and the capital Tokyo is considered the largest urban economy on the planet. Greater even than the economies of New York and London. The most striking fact about the economy of Japan is that the extraordinary prosperity has been achieved in the conditions of an almost total absence of natural mineral resources. 3. The incredible progress of the country over the last few decades is known as the Japanese economic miracle, to the power of 6. How were they able to have this economic miracle despite their lack of natural resources? They achieved their economic miracle due to one singular reason. That is the fact that they are disciplined with time. They have an understanding of time and know the worth of it. The Japanese do not waste time like we do in Africa. They are hard-working people. To a large extent, the progress of Japan is the result of extended working week and day. Compared with other countries, Japan needs a shorter period of time to achieve the same financial results. 4. Nigeria can have the same economic miracle if we can understand the nature of time and make proper use of it like the Japanese do. If every citizen of Nigeria will show the same diligence with their time as the Japanese do, we would quickly turn our nation into a first-world nation. But it is unfortunate that this subject of proper use of time is hardly even talked about in our African countries. Why is it that we still import almost every product we consume from other countries? Why are we not a productive nation? It is shameful to find that Nigeria still imports plastics and pencils from China. It seems our country has become a dumping ground for any kind of products from the first world countries. The reason, of course, is obvious. It is because first world nations have a better understanding of time than Africans do. They thus better convert their time into products than we do. It is because of how we trivialize and waste time in Africa that we have little or nothing to boast about as a continent. We have not been taught that time must be converted into products. Most citizens of Africa do not know that time must be converted into some products, benefits, goods, services, welfare, ministry, etc. And because they are ignorant of the true nature of time, they have no products to show for their time. That is why we are a consuming continent and not a producing one. African countries are for the most part importing countries for the singular reason that we do not have products to export. Not that we do not have natural resources, but that we do not know how to invest time to convert them into exportable products. Hence, we allow this 86,400 seconds of time slip by every day unused, unharnessed and unconverted. Time, however, has a progressive nature and waits for no man. Hence, it keeps slipping by, not minding whether men recognize its worth or not. It will not wait for anyone. It is either we choose to convert it into products that will be of economic value to our nation or let it pass by unconverted. The choice is ours to make. But if we truly desire to make every African nation a first world nation, we must heed the lessons that this book offers and take advantage of them to build the kind of continent that the world will admire. In conclusion of this chapter, I would like to remind you some of the points that we have discussed here. We started by saying that time is the greatest wealth that every individual and every nation has been given equally, and that whatever each nation does with the wealth of time that it has determines how developed or underdeveloped that nation becomes. This wealth of time is of more value than natural resources, and until time is properly harnessed, natural resources cannot be of any economic value. Therefore, to truly build a first-world nation like Singapore, Japan, USA, etc., African nations must first understand the worth of the wealth of time that they have and use it judiciously. In the next chapter, I shall discuss with you the value of time and the concept of the cliché, African time. 1. The wealth of nations is dependent on time. Every nation is therefore wealthy because of the resource of time that they have. 2. The prosperity of any nation will depend largely upon what its citizens do with the wealth of time that they have equally. 3. The richest countries in the world are those who have been able to harness the wealth of time to their advantage. 4. The nations that are regarded as developed nations are those who have been able to convert the wealth of time into a high GDP, a high Human Development Index, a high educational standard, and world-class industries. 5. A country is referred to as a first-world nation only if that country has been able to use time wisely to build a highly developed economy and an advanced technological infrastructure. 6. Time is the greatest resource in the world. It is the resource from which all other resources come and depend. 7. No infrastructure will exist in a nation if the citizens of that nation had not invested time to build it. 8. It is what every nation does with the resource of time that will determine how developed that nation will become. 9. Since every nation has been given the wealth of time equally, they all therefore have equal chance to become first-world nations. 10. Nigeria is still a developing nation after 57 years of independence because we do not know how to use time for productive work. 11. A country could be full of all the natural and human resources, but if that country fails to understand and make proper use of the wealth of time, she stands to remain a poor and an underdeveloped nation. 12. Africans generally have not been thoroughly taught how to use the wealth of time to convert all other resources into economic prosperity for our continent and our individual nations. 13. We are a blessed continent full of natural resources, but our lack of understanding and judicious use of time has kept us in a poor and beggarly state. 14. Natural mineral resources are of no value in a country if the citizens of that country will not invest their time to harness and process them. 15. It is not enough to just have abundant natural resources. Time must be understood and taken advantage of to convert those natural resources into economic value if we truly desire to become first-world nations. 16. The slow rate of development in almost every sector of Nigeria, for example, could attest to the fact that Africans do not know how to invest time and convert it into products for economic growth and national prosperity. 17. The underdevelopment and high rate of poverty in any country is a result of how poorly the citizens of that country understand the value of time. 18. If every citizen of Nigeria will show the same diligence with their time as the Japanese do, we would quickly turn our nation into a first-world nation. Chapter 2. How African Time Destroys Africa's Development. Having explained in the first chapter the wealth of time that we all have as individuals and as nations, I will in this chapter explain how lack of understanding of the worth or value of time destroys Africa's development. The concept of African time. Ladies and gentlemen, the reason I have decided to address the issue of time as a factor of economic regeneration for Africa and Nigeria in particular is because there is no other part of the world where time is more viciously squandered as on the continent of Africa. Time is really the only capital that any human being has, and the only thing he can't afford to lose. Thomas Edison. I would not waste your time here trying to prove to you that we don't know the value of time in Africa, especially Nigeria, where I come from. The term African time is all too well a sad testimony for which Africa has become notoriously famous. What is African time? The term African time is a perceived cultural tendency, in some parts of Africa, towards a more relaxed attitude to time. This is sometimes used in a pejorative sense, about tardiness in appointments, meetings and events. This also includes the more leisurely, relaxed, and less rigorously scheduled lifestyle found in African countries, especially as opposed to the more clock-bound pace of daily life in the Western world. The Westerners call it colored people's time or black people's time, squared. According to the Urban Dictionary, African time is when one says they will arrive at a certain time, but arrive much later. From the definition above, you would realize that Africans actually do not know the value of time. It is shameful to even find out that this lax attitude towards something as precious as time has become so popular that it could be found on Wikipedia and on Urban Dictionary. It goes to show that we do not really know the worth of time, and it is a popular fact. This African time has become so popular that it has become almost like a normal thing in Africa, especially in Nigeria. People no longer see anything wrong with it. Almost everyone in Nigeria has no respect for time and has consciously or unconsciously agreed that it is okay to lose something that valuable to other nations and not remorse over it. When this concept of African time first started, it was only seen being displayed at ceremonies where the invited guests come an hour or two later than the scheduled time for the ceremony. However, today, there is almost no aspect of our life where the concept of African time is not practiced. From businesses meetings, to sports, to schools, to church, to political meetings and even to banks. It is now a common practice in our aviation sector, transport sector, and in almost every sector of our nation. I even read a story of someone who said he was passing by a business enterprise and saw an inscription on their notice board which reads, "All workers must resume to work before 8 a.m. No worker will be forgiven after exceeding the stipulated African time. N.B. African time extension is 9 a.m. That story is just a proof that African time has become the way of life in Nigeria. Most times when Nigerians come to Ukraine to visit me, they display this lax attitude to time before my very eyes. They know that my live broadcast starts 9 p.m. Ukrainian time, and instead of them to come into the studio and get seated before the time, most of them wait until the exact time or some minutes past the time before leaving their rooms to come into the studio. I once read an article on the internet in which the writer talked about how the African time has even found its way into the Nigerian Football League. He wrote, "It will be so funny that in the Nigerian Professional Football League, a match was fixed for 4 p.m., and without any hindrance, the match started 4:30 p.m. That was not funny enough, but the match started without the commentator apologizing for their misdeed. Such a thing can hardly happen in developed nations of the world where time is valued and respected. In Nigeria, people get ready for meetings and intentionally sit at home some extra minutes behind the stipulated time for the meeting before they leave the house. They do this because they are so sure that if they get to the venue of the meeting at the prompt time, no one would be there. They know every other person will come at the African time. One cannot imagine the amount of wealth that is freely wasted in Africa just by practicing African time. But all that will soon change beginning from Nigeria. I hope that when I get to Nigeria, I will be able to do everything I can to make the Senate pass into law a bill that will aid a more judicious use of time by every citizen and discipline anyone who practices African time. It is my desire that it becomes an offense punishable by law to waste someone else's time in the name of African time. I also hope that it become a matter of principle in Nigeria that time must not be wasted anymore. The value and wealth of time should be taught in schools, in churches and at home until every citizen gets to understand it. People must be taught that the value of time is equal to the value of life. The words of Charles Darwin, "A man who dares to waste 1 hour of time has not discovered the value of life," must become our slogan in Nigeria if we really want to become a first world nation. To truly become a great nation, we must do away with the concept of African time and make everyone understand the value of time. Understanding the value of time. In this session, I would like to quickly paint a picture of the value of time to you, my friends. If you want to know the value of a year, ask the student who was in the final year of his university education, when the lecturers went on strike and the school ended up closing for a year. If you want to know the value of a month, ask a pregnant woman if a month matters in her pregnancy. If you want to know the value of a week, ask the editor of a weekly magazine if he fails to meet up with the target of his weekly publication. If you want to know the value of a day, ask someone who could not find food to eat or water to drink for a whole day when he is hungry. If you want to know the value of an hour, ask new lovebirds, lovers that are waiting for each other at different bus stations. If you want to know the value of a minute, ask the person who came to the train station or airport in China a minute late. If you want to know the value of a second, ask the person who just crossed the road at the wrong time and barely escaped being hit by a speeding car. If you want to know the value of half a second, ask the person who came second in a sprint event at the Olympics won. I believe that if you could ask all the above-mentioned people about the value of time, they would tell you that time is the greatest resource in the world. They would tell you that time is the most valuable wealth that God has freely given to man. Not only is it the most valuable resource but also the scarcest of all resources. It is, however, unfortunate that my African brothers and sisters do not understand the value of time as described above. Time is what we want most but what we use worst. William Penn. Africans do not see the urgency in time. We have not been taught to value every second, minute and hour of time. Hence, instead of us to guard time from being lost, we squander it, we waste it on irrelevant activities. Others do nothing with it and allow it just slip by into vanity. That is the reason we are still a backward continent. We are struggling economically because we do not know the value of time. If we know the value of time, we would never waste it. If we know the value of time, we would use every bit of it productively. If we Africans know the value of time, we would never practice African time. To become a first world nation, we must change our attitude to time and begin to see it as the scarcest and most important of all resources. If we want to become an economically prosperous nation, we must lay hold of every second, minute and hour of time and convert it into products of economic value. It is my belief that a careful understanding and judicious use of this one singular factor, time, can turn any African country into a first world country. But as long as we keep wasting time in Nigeria and in Africa, we would still remain a dark continent, a dependent continent and a backward nation. How time wastage affects Africa's development. It is not a surprise that among the continents of the world, Africa has the slowest growth rate. We are the most underdeveloped continent in the world, and the reason is because we do not know how to manage time. We waste time as though it is of no value. If we cannot manage the most precious and most valuable of all resources, how do we hope to manage our homes, our churches, our business, our schools and our nation? Peter F. Drucker got it right when he said, "Time is the scarcest resource and unless it is managed, nothing else can be managed." I am not surprised that almost nothing works effectively in Africa. It is because we cannot manage anything. Our roads are poorly managed. Our drainage systems are poorly managed. Our ministries and public service sectors are poorly managed. Our judiciary is poorly managed. If one turns to the legislative arm of government, one will find that it is still badly managed. The same is true for the executive arm of government. What about our universities and schools? They are also mismanaged. Even our media and art sector are still suffering management problems. There is almost no sector of our economy that one can proudly say there has perfect management. Is it the power sector, the oil sector, or the works and housing sector? Is it the sports sector, the industrial sector, or telecommunication? Management is either zero or below average in almost every aspect of our lives. The reason is simply because we cannot manage time. A nation that cannot manage time cannot manage anything. The same nonchalant attitude we have towards time is reflected in everything else we are given to manage. Just the way we waste time, that is how we waste money. Our wastage of time is reflected in how we waste our mineral resources. And not only that, we also waste our human resources. That is why we cannot become a first world nation until we first learn to manage time. If we learn to manage time, then we can manage everything else. If we can manage time, then we can manage our industries in multinational companies. If we can manage time, then we can manage our economy. When we become cautious with time, we will become cautious with money. Any nation that manages time properly will most likely manage its citizens properly. If we can manage time, then we can manage our hospitals. When we respect time, we will respect life. Don't forget that the value of time is equal to the value of life. Hence, if we cannot respect time, we cannot respect life. Most people die in the hospitals in Africa not because they could not have been saved, but because someone fails to act in time. If we cannot manage a resource, we are bound to waste it. That is why time is freely wasted in Africa, because we cannot manage it. The result of that time wastage will be a failure of economic development. If we waste time instead of using it productively at the factories, we destroy our own economic development. If we waste time instead of using it for scientific and medical research in the laboratories, we destroy our scientific and medical advancement. If we waste time instead of using it for technological research and inventions in the workshops, we hinder our own technological advancement. If we squander time instead of invested in the farm processing agricultural food and cash crops, we deprive ourselves of our agricultural development and prosperity. If we waste time instead of using it at the refineries to process our crude oil, we reduce our capacity to export its finished products to the world. If we waste time instead of using it to organize and train our citizens how to start their own small and medium-scale business enterprises, we deprive ourselves of human capital development. I could go on and on mentioning how we destroy our own development by wasting time instead of making productive use of it. But that of course will produce an unending list. I believe from the foregoing that it is becoming clearer to you why Africa is a backward continent. I hope you are now beginning to see the negative impact our lack of value for time has on our nations. There is no way we can become a developed nation if we don't properly address the issue of time wastage in Africa. It is perhaps the root of all our problems and economic recession. That is why I have made it a duty to teach so much about the importance of time and how to use it wisely. Until it becomes a common knowledge in all of Africa that time worth more than all other resources that we can think of. And that it is therefore expedient that we stop wasting it. My desire is that it becomes a part of our national lives, that in the nearest future, Africa would become the continent where every man, woman, boy and girl understands and uses properly this wealth of time to build not only their individual lives but that of their nations. I believe that if we open the eyes of our people to understand the value of time, it is unbelievable what effect that is going to have on the economy. That is why in the next chapter, I will explain how the resource of time can be turned into an increase in GDP and a stable economy. 1. To truly become a great nation, we must do away with the concept of African time and make everyone understand the value of time. 2. Time is the most valuable wealth that God has freely given to man. Not only is it the most valuable resource but also the scarcest of all resources. 3. Because we have not been taught to value every second, minute and hour of time. we waste and squander it on irrelevant activities instead of to guard it from being lost. 4. If we want to become an economically prosperous nation, we must lay hold of every second, minute and hour of time and convert it into products of economic value. 5. As long as we keep wasting time in Nigeria and in Africa, we would still remain a dark continent, a dependent continent and a backward nation. 6. A nation that cannot manage time cannot manage anything. 7. If we waste time instead of using it productively at the factories, we destroy our own economic development. 8. If we waste time instead of using it for scientific and medical research in the laboratories, we destroy our scientific and medical advancement. 9. There is no way we can become a developed nation if we don't properly address the issue of time wastage in Africa. 10. If we cannot manage a resource, we are bound to waste it. That is why time is freely wasted in Africa, because we cannot manage it. Chapter 2. How African Time Destroys Africa's Development. Jam keeps people on the road and they Chapter 3. How Nigeria, in Africa can double her GDP. In the previous chapter, we discussed the value of time and how lack of understanding of the value of time leads to waste of time and which in turn destroys Africa's developmental growth. In this chapter, the critical question we must consider is, how does the recognition of the value of time, the change in our attitude to time management and time consciousness translate into economic growth or increase in GDP for that matter? I plan to prove to you that the wealth of time we waste in Africa is worth much more than all the natural resources we have on the continent. I also hope to convince you with facts and figures that a more positive attitude toward time management would accelerate our economic development as we have never seen before. 1. The statistics and economics of time. Having grown up in Africa myself, I know for a fact that arriving late for work appointments, schools, classes, lectures, meetings, and churches is the order of the day. I don't know of your experience, but in my experience, it is normal for people to come to meetings 3 hours late. That is a lot of time that can be converted into money, as my statistics below will prove. However, even if we take only 1 hour as the average amount of time that people waste daily, that would still give us a staggering statistics and negative economic effect. Being busy does not always mean real work. The object of all work is production or accomplishment, and to either of these ends there must be forethought, system, planning, intelligence, and honest purpose, as well as perspiration. Seeming to do is not doing. Thomas A. Edison. Apart from being late to work, there is another way time is being squandered in Africa. Most times people go to work but don't really do any work. People could be busy, yet doing nothing productive. Hence, apart from the time people waste by coming late to work, they also waste time while at their workplace. It is a common occurrence in Nigeria that people go to work and yet do nothing productive while at work. They seem to be working yet not working. Such time used for non-productive work is still wasted time. It is therefore imperative that our citizens both in the private and public sector be taught the value of time and the effect it could have on our economy if properly harnessed or wasted. Time can be used to double our GDP if we understand its value and use it wisely. Please carefully follow my reasoning below. If every major meeting starts an hour late in Nigeria, when an hour is valued at $10, and if 40 million Nigerians are late just for 1 hour a day to work or appointments, That will equal 400 million United States dollars a day lost to a lack of an understanding of the value of time. I assume 40 million will be the number of able-bodied Nigerians of a working age in the minimum. If we assume people go late to meetings 3 hours a day instead of 1 hour in a day, at the same value of 10 United States dollars, then the 400 million United States dollars should be multiplied 3 times, making it 1.2 billion United States dollars in a day, lost to lack of one single value: time. Please notice that an average Nigerian worker might actually be able to produce a product worth more than 10 United States dollars an hour. The amount could actually be equal to how much we make from oil at the end of the day if we take this seriously enough. If we lose 1.2 billion United States dollars a day, in the case each of our workers loses 3 hours daily to vanity like lateness, jokes, gossip, empty talk, sleep on duty, social media, etc. If we have 20 working days in a month, and we lose 1.2 billion a day, that would translate to 1.2 billion x 20 days equals 24 billion United States dollars lost monthly to lack of value for time. Please think about it now. If working months in Nigeria are only 10 months due to the holidays, that comes to 24 billion x 10 equals 240 billion United States dollars a year. For your information, our GDP is only 2 times that amount at 510 billion United States dollars. Meaning we could actually double our GDP in 2 years if we only change our attitude to time. Some might argue that a Nigerian worker does not make $10 an hour. Maybe, but I would like to encourage you to do your own math and put any figure you want. It would still amount to a huge chunk of our GDP lost to vanity, frivolity, purposelessness, futility, and ineffectiveness. When I talk about 10 United States dollars an hour, I am not talking about the takeaway salary of the worker. I am talking about the total amount of the gross product a worker in Nigeria is capable of producing. Even though he might end up taking away just 1 United States dollar of that as his salary, the amount of product produced is still relevant to the economy. Because that is what results in the subtotal amount of any nation's GDP. You could say, no, people are never 3 hours late in a day. Well, my calculation is, considering the fact that somebody might be 1 hour late to work, another 1 hour late to church, and yet another 1 hour late to an appointment same day. 3 meetings produce 1 hour lateness each, meaning 3 hours lateness in a day. If you think it is not as bad in your own community, okay, that is good. But the point still remains, I encourage you to go ahead and calculate whatever number of hours you think people in your area waste due to just the factor of lateness. You must, however, pay attention to the fact that we don't only lose time to lateness. We also lose time to jokes, gossip, empty talks, sleep on duty, social media, etc. Most Nigerians will agree with me that this is a conservative estimation. I have personally witnessed when Nigerian government officials spend nothing less than an hour in observing protocols, introducing all kinds of dignitaries instead of using the time for active productivity. 1. We all must repent. We all must change our attitude to time. From the top government functionaries to the man on the street. From the university professors to the primary school teachers. From PhD students to primary school pupils. We need a total change in our attitude to time. 5. A more judicious use of time can double our GDP and economic growth in just 2 years. The proper use of time alone will propel our nation and continent to the league of advanced countries of the world. It is not enough to just be busy. Time must be used for productive work. It's not enough to be busy, so are the ants. The question is, what are we busy about? Henry David Thoreau, The Way Forward. Having seen the statistics of time and how it affects our economy from my calculations above, we need to now look at the way forward. What do we need to do now to double our GDP, gross domestic product? Obviously, we need to make a more judicious use of our time. But before I talk more on that, it is imperative that you first understand what makes up the GDP of a nation, as I well understand that you may not be an economist. The gross domestic product (GDP) is one of the primary indicators used to gauge the health of a country's economy. It represents the total dollar value of all goods and services produced over a specific time period, often referred to as the size of the economy. It measures the monetary value of final goods and services, that is, those that are bought by the final user, produced in a country in a given period of time, squared. Dear friends, what did you notice from the definition of GDP above? If you paid attention to that definition, you would have seen that the GDP of any country is the total amount of goods and services produced calculated in USD over a period of time. I want you to take note of two things. One is goods produced and the other is services rendered. If it is the number of goods and services produced that decides a nation's GDP and hence its economic health, then what does Nigeria and Africa need to do to double her GDP? It is simple. Produce more goods and render more services. However, it must be noted that not all productive activity is included in GDP. For example, unpaid work, such as that performed in the home or by volunteers, are not included because they are difficult to measure and value accurately. That means, for example, that a baker who produces a loaf of bread for a customer would contribute to GDP, but would not contribute to GDP if he baked the same loaf for his family, although the ingredients he purchased would be counted, cubed. If it is that simple to contribute to the GDP of a nation, why then is it that difficult for us to do? Why are we still suffering economic recession? Why are our government officials spending about an hour of precious time in observing protocols, introducing all kinds of dignitaries when they could use that time for active productivity and add to our GDP? If it is our active productivity that decides our GDP, why are we still losing a huge chunk of our GDP to vanity, frivolity, purposelessness, futility, and ineffectiveness? Why are our working-class citizens wasting so much time to vanity like lateness, jokes, gossip, empty talk, sleep on duty, social media, etc.? If every citizen can contribute to our GDP by using time productively, then it is useless for the bulk of our youths to just be roaming the streets, hanging out in pubs and cinemas, and sitting idle at home doing nothing. What you and I should do is to get involved in any form of productive activity or service that has a monetary value and adds to economic growth. If we are really going to double our GDP, every citizen must stop wasting time on non-productive activities. We need to teach every citizen that whenever they sit down idle and don't engage in economic or productive activity, they are actually doing harm to our economy. It should be emphasized in schools, churches, and mosques that it is a sin against the nation to waste precious time on vanities or activities that are of no economic value. The way forward to doubling our GDP is to get everyone to engage in productive work. Besides just working productively, we must work longer hours. We must convert more time into products through work than any other nation in the world. The longer the time we use for productive work, the more products we will produce and the more our gross domestic product. I believe you are beginning to see why the Japanese, the Chinese, and the Americans work longer hours. That is the secret of their economic growth and huge GDP. It must be noted, however, that longer work hours do not necessarily translate to higher productivity. But a combination of longer work hours and productivity can truly turn a nation around for good. The number of working hours. What should Nigeria and Africa do to double her GDP and make it larger than that of Japan, China, and the USA? We need to increase our productive working time. The average working time in the world is 40 hours of work per week. That is 8 hours of work per day for 5 working days. A typical Nigerian public or private office resumes work 9 a.m. in the morning and to the power of 4D closes by 4 p.m. in the afternoon. That is even less than 8 hours of work per day. We must not also forget that there are common scenarios in Lagos and Port Harcourt, especially where traffic jam keeps people on the road and they get to work every day by 11 a.m. or 12 noon. That is, they lose 3 or 4 hours of working time to vanity on their way to work. Hence, they work only for about 4 hours a day instead of 8 hours. However, according to the Nigeria Labor Act, every worker is to work 6 hours per day with a break period of 1 hour. The Labor Act also allows at least a full 24 hours of consecutive time off per 7 days, to the power of 4 to the power of 5. In the Western world, like in the USA, the Labor Act states that the number of hours of work per day should be 8 hours. Comparing this to that of Nigeria, people in the USA work 2 hours longer than the Nigerian Labor Act stipulates. We should not be surprised then that they have a far higher GDP than we do. They are a more productive country than we are. That is why it is expedient for us to increase our productive working hours in Nigeria if we want to build an economically competitive nation. The economic productivity of any nation is dependent on the number of hours its citizens engage in productive work. Therefore, instead of us losing $1.2 billion a day to vanity like lateness, jokes, gossip, empty talk, sleep on duty, social media, etc., as we calculated in the previous session, we can actually gain that amount of money daily by increasing our working time by 3 hours. This means that instead of working an average of 8 hours per day, we should work an average of 11 hours per day. Instead of offices opening by 9 a.m. and closing by 4 p.m., they should open by 9 a.m. and close by 6 p.m. or open by 8 a.m. and close by 5 p.m. And this amount of time must be used for productivity and not just for unproductive work. I believe if we do this, we would increase our GDP by $1.2 billion a day, $24 billion a month, 20 working days, and $288 billion a year, 12 months. I use 12 working months per year on the assumption that we stop observing all the unnecessary public holidays. Last year, the governor of Kogi State, Nigeria, declared a public holiday in his state because President Buhari was returning from an over 100-day medical trip in London. Very recently, the government of Plateau State declared 8th of March a public holiday simply because the president of the country was coming to visit that state. Just when many well-meaning Nigerians thought that was foolishness on the part of these governors. The Lagos State Governor declared 29th of March 2018 a public holiday for the same reason of the President of Nigeria visiting that state on that day. It should be noted that this is just a day before the Easter Friday holiday, which continues on Monday also. That means economic activities in Lagos will be shut down from Wednesday night till Tuesday morning of the following week. In these three cases, the civil service and labor force were asked to enjoy work-free days and allow the wealth of time slip by into vanity. Can you imagine how much economic products and money will be lost in those states on those days? If we are really serious about making Nigeria and every African country a first world nation, we must stop wasting time on numerous holidays. We must learn the discipline of time management. If nations that are already developed are having public holidays, we who are trying to compete and catch up with them in economic growth should reduce our public holidays and use those times for more productive work. In Japan, there are 15 days of holidays a year. In the United States, there are only 10 public holidays in a year. The United Kingdom has only 8 public holidays. Mexico has 7 public holidays to the power of 6. Nigeria, however, has scheduled 19 public holidays for the year 2018, including national and state holidays to the power of 7. It is easy to see why our economy is the way it is. If these countries that are already developed are having very few holidays, shouldn't Nigeria, with a recessed economy and poor development, have much fewer holidays? Doesn't common sense tell us that we should invest more time into productive work if we want to become a first world nation? Becoming the largest economy in the world will require from us a kind of discipline that will bring us to a place where we begin to downplay public holidays, weekends, and unnecessary work leaves. I know this is a strange concept to a typical Nigerian worker. I understand that Nigerians are happy whenever it's Friday because they won't have to go to work the following 2 days. In fact, most workers dream of weekends and are unhappy to resume work on Monday mornings. This is, however, not the case in first world countries like Japan. The Japanese, as I stated earlier, enjoy working long hours. They hate to go home even after official closing time. In the local government offices in Toshima, a district of downtown Tokyo, they have resorted to turning the office lights off at 7 p.m. in an effort to force people to go home. A lot of them love to work overtime. According to a recent survey, nearly a quarter of Japanese companies have employees working more than 80 hours overtime a month, often unpaid. And 12% have employees working over 100 hours a month overtime. Workers are entitled to 20 days leave a year, but currently about 35% don't take any of it, to the power of 8. This report explains why the Japanese have a high economic prosperity. They are always engaged in productive work and by so doing contribute to the GDP of their country. It is no secret why they are a first world nation. As long as we continue to run away from work and waste time on relaxation and unproductive activities, we will never be able to compete with the first world nations in the area of economic growth and development. The truth is that if we desire to become a world-class nation, we must be ready to sacrifice our time for productive work. That is the only way we can double our nation's GDP and build a first world nation. Government is not the generator of economic growth, working people are. Phil Graham. So, the next time you are sitting idle instead of working, remember that you are killing our economy. The next time you are gossiping and telling gist during work hours, you are diminishing our GDP. The next time you abandon your work to chat on Facebook, WhatsApp, Twitter, Instagram, etc., you must remember that you are part of the reason for our economic recession. Any day you refuse to go to work and fail to engage in productive activity, you destroy our economic growth. The more productive you are with your time, the more products and services you will produce, and the more you will contribute to the economic growth of the country. In conclusion of this chapter, you must remember that the GDP of our nation is dependent on how you and I are able to use our time for productive work and services. And that any time we go late to work, or allow time to pass by without using it productively, we inadvertently oppose the economic growth and development of our nation. If we, however, become more disciplined with the use of time, we can double our GDP in the shortest possible time. In the next chapter, we shall discuss the need to invest time for human capital development. 1. Any time used for non-productive work is still wasted time. 2. Time can be used to double our GDP if we understand its value and use it wisely. 3. A more judicious use of time can double our GDP and economic growth in just 2 years. The proper use of time alone will propel our nation and continent to the league of advanced countries of the world. 4. If every citizen can contribute to our GDP by using time productively, then it is useless for the bulk of our youths to just be roaming the streets, hanging out in pubs and cinemas, and sitting idle at home doing nothing. 5. If we are really going to double our GDP, every citizen must stop wasting time on non-productive activities. 6. The economic productivity of any nation is dependent on the number of hours its citizens engage in productive work. 7. Becoming the largest economy in the world will require from us a kind of discipline that will bring us to a place where we begin to downplay public holidays, weekends, and unnecessary work leaves. 8. As long as we continue to run away from work and waste time on relaxation and unproductive activities, we will never be able to compete with the first world nations in the area of economic growth and development. 9. The only way we can double our nation's GDP and build a first world nation is to sacrifice our time for productive work. 10. The more productive you are with your time, the more products and services you will produce, and the more you will contribute to the economic growth of the country. Chapter 3. How Nigeria, in Africa can double her Chapter 3. How Nigeria, in Africa can double her GDP. In the previous chapter, we discussed the value of time and how lack of understanding of the value of Chapter 4. Human Capital Development. Chapter 4. Human Capital Development is key. In this chapter, we shall analyze the role of human capital development in the development of nations. The chapter discusses how Africa can become a continent with first world nations by simply using the resource of time to develop its human capital. The need for human capital development. If Nigeria and Africa are going to achieve the status of first world nations, human capital development must be given utmost priority. To truly build a nation with a robust economy, we must invest in human capital development. A look at the sustained growth of the economy of most first world nations will reveal to us that their economic prosperity is as a result of how committed they are to human capital development. No nation becomes a first world nation without first using time for developing its human capital. So, what is human capital and why does it need to be developed? The concept of human capital refers to the abilities and skills of human resources of a country, while human capital development refers to the process of acquiring and increasing the number of persons who have the skills, education and experience that are critical for economic growth and development of a country's economy. From the definition above, you would realize that the population of any nation makes up the human resources in that nation. These human resources possess certain amount of skills, abilities and knowledge that are needed to develop that nation. If it is the skills, abilities and knowledge of the populace that determines how developed a nation becomes, then it is of utmost importance that every nation that desires development and economic growth should be committed to increasing the number of people with those skills, abilities and know-hows. The process of doing this is what is called human capital development. However, the process of human capital development is only possible thanks to a judicious use of the wealth of time. From the foregoing, we could say that the most important thing that any nation can do with the wealth of time that it has is to use it for the development of its human resources. That is to say, the wealth of time should be used to teach each citizen new skills, to maximize the potentials of each one of them and to increase their knowledge in various spheres of life. That is the secret of the first world nations. They invest their wealth of time to develop their human capital. The developed nations of the world have imbibed a culture in their citizens that makes everyone use their wealth of time to seek new skills and specialized knowledge in various fields of life. People in first world nations have learnt the need to use time for continuous self-development. That is why citizens of such nations are able to contribute towards the economic growth and development of their nations, squared. Why do we need to develop our human capital? It is because it is a known fact that human resources is a major determinant of how wealthy a nation becomes. Therefore, any nation that desires to become a first world and an economically prosperous nation must teach its citizens how to use their wealth of time to develop new skills and knowledge and how to use these skills and know-hows to radically transform the nation's economy. Economists who have studied the relationship between education and economic growth confirm what common sense suggests. The number of college degrees is not nearly as important as how well students develop cognitive skills, such as critical thinking and problem-solving ability. Derek Bach. Human capital development is beyond just having college degrees. It is about having the necessary skills and know-hows to drive economic growth. The importance of human capital development in the development of nations cannot be overemphasized. Studies have shown that nations with sustainable economic growth are those that have used their wealth of time to develop their human capital, while third world and underdeveloped nations are those that have failed to invest their time in human capital development. Statistics are available to back up these facts. According to a report by the World Economic Forum in 2017, the Global Human Capital Index 2017 ranks 130 countries on how well they are developing their human capital across 4 dimensions: capacity, deployment, development and know-how, as well as across different age groups. Below is the list of a few nations and their ranking. Norway ranked first with an index of 77.12%, Finland ranked second with an index of 77.07%, Switzerland ranked third with an index of 76.48%. United States of America ranked fourth with an index of 74.84%, Denmark ranked fifth with an index of 74.40%. Germany ranked 6th with an index of 74.30%, New Zealand ranked 7th with an index of 74.14%, Sweden ranked 8th with an index of 73.95%. Slovenia ranked 9th with an index of 73.33%, Austria ranked 10th with an index of 73.29%, while Singapore ranked 11th with an index of 73.28% cubed. Looking at the statistics above, you will realize that no African country is among the first 11 positions in the world on human capital development. All these nations listed above are highly developed and first world nations. That should tell us that there is a connection between human capital development and the economic prosperity and development of nations. All these first world nations invest most of their time to build skills and expertise in their citizens. People in these nations are trained, made to attend seminars and workshops on skill development and human capacity building, and thanks to that they are able to contribute positively to the development of their nations. I would like us to see the ranking for some selected African countries according to the same report. It was reported that countries from sub-Saharan Africa had the lowest ranking, to the power of 4. Rwanda ranked position 71. Ghana ranked position 72. Cameroon ranked position 73. South Africa ranked position 87. Nigeria ranked position 114. Ethiopia ranked. Dear friends, I believe it is obvious from the above report that Africa is the least developed amongst the continents of the world because attention is not being given to the use of time for human capital development. That is a direct result of the amount of time that is wasted in Africa. Instead of us to invest time in learning new skills, educating ourselves and increasing our potential for development, we oftentimes while away time and use it for vanity like jokes, lateness, playing games and partying. It is easy to see why we are a backward nation if we pay attention to how much time we spend on everything else but human capital development. But what are we supposed to do with the wealth of time that we have? We are supposed to use the bulk of it for human capital development. More often than not, we give the bulk of our time to road construction, building of houses, building of hospitals, etc., and give little or none of it to building human capital. It is for this reason that we invite expatriates to build our roads, our bridges, our railways, our factories, and much more. It is for the same reason that our politicians and the elite always travel abroad for medical treatments. It is because our human resources have not been properly trained. We haven't invested time in human capacity building. On the 22nd of March 2018, the National Economic Council of Nigeria had a meeting in Abuja at which Bill Gates and Aliko Dangote were key speakers. The world's second richest man, Bill Gates, advised the Nigerian government to maximize the nation's greatest resource, which is the Nigerian people, saying that the country will only thrive when every citizen is able to thrive. That is to say, a nation can only be developed when its human capital is developed. Hence, inasmuch as it is good to build physical infrastructures, it is better to build human capital. The reason is that roads, ports, and factories without skilled workers to build and manage them can't sustain an economy. Speaking further at the meeting, Bill Gates urged the Nigerian government to invest more in the Nigerian people. He said that even though the Nigerian government's economic recovery and growth plan identify investing in its citizens as one of 3 strategic objectives, the execution priorities don't fully reflect people's needs, prioritizing physical capital over human capital. He said to anchor the Nigerian economy over the long term, investments in infrastructure and competitiveness must go hand in hand with investments in people, to the power of 5. Dear friends, what should we take from the words of Bill Gates? It is the point I have been trying to communicate to you from the beginning of this chapter about the need for human capital development. It is the fact that we must realize that human capital is a critical factor for the development and economic growth of any nation, and as such must be given priority in Nigeria and in Africa. It is my belief that Nigeria's biggest assets are the people of Nigeria. We have a population of about 190 million people, and if we can invest our time in developing these people, we would soon become a first world nation. The place of human capital development in economic growth cannot be overemphasized. It is a key prerequisite for a country's socio-economic and national transformation, to the power of 6. How time can be used to develop human capital. Dear friends, having seen the need for human capital development and its role in building a first-world nation, I would like us to now discuss how the most important of all resources, time, can be used for human capital development. It is already an established fact in this book that time, if properly harnessed, can be used to double the GDP of any nation and bring about economic growth and development. That will, however, only be possible by first using time to develop human resource. How then should time be used to develop human resource? It is simple. Since human capital refers to the amount of knowledge, skills, experiences, and creative capacity that the citizens of a nation possess to develop human capital, we need to use time to teach every citizen how to be more skillful, more experienced, more creative, and more knowledgeable, to the power of 7. That means that people should be made to invest their wealth of time in attending skill acquisition trainings, educational workshops, vocational trainings, technical schools, trade and business seminars, and personal development conferences. So, instead of spending time at the cinema, you should invest it in yourself by going to the library to study, instead of hanging out in pubs and clubs. You should lock yourself up in the laboratory doing experiments and researching how to find the cures to the diseases and sicknesses that plague our people. To use time to develop human capital, every citizen should learn to use time for self-development in the areas of science and technology, construction and mechanical engineering, agricultural development, information and telecommunication, etc. Instead of Nigeria having to invite Chinese, Arabs and Russians to come construct our roads, build our factories and run our companies, the government should rather train the Nigerian citizens to become competent in a skillful handling of each of the above-mentioned tasks, instead of us sending our crude oil abroad to be refined by other nations. Let's use our wealth of time to train our people how to build functional refineries and how to refine our crude oil by ourselves. If it means bringing expatriates to train our citizens for some number of years, let's do it. If it means organizing a year-long seminar or workshop to train citizens on information technology, agricultural research, scientific research, small and medium-scale business enterprise, petroleum refining, etc., let's go ahead and do it. Whether we like it or not, time must be used to build people instead of just building physical structures. Time must be used to develop various kind of skills in each and every citizen of the country. If we fail to use time to acquire knowledge, we will keep depending on other nations to help us with any little project we hope to carry out. We must arm every citizen with adequate knowledge. Knowledge will forever govern ignorance, and a people who mean to be their own governors must arm themselves with the power which knowledge gives. James Madison. That is how first world nations are built, by first building capacity in each citizen. Imagine what will happen if at least 2/3 of the Nigerian population is highly skilled in various aspects of life, from medicine, to science and technology, to business and economics, to art and telecommunications and even governance. Our nation will be full of professional businessmen, doctors, technocrats, engineers, lawyers, scientists, inventors, developmental strategists, musicians, manufacturers, authors, etc. The role of the educational sector. One cannot overemphasize the role of the educational sector in human capital development. As you will very well remember from our statistics above on human capital development, Norway had the first place. The reason they have a high human capital development is not far-fetched. It is connected to their educational sector. Research has shown that Norway has the best educational system in the world. According to a report in 2017, Norway was ranked the best country in the world when it comes to the training and education of its population. The country also has 100% literacy rate, while Nigeria has only about 60% literacy rate, to the power of 8. One should not be surprised, therefore, that Norway ranked first in human capital development while Nigeria ranked at position 114. Education is the key to building and developing human capital. That is one of the secrets of first world nation building an effective educational sector. That is, they have a curriculum that is up to date and addresses the problems of a changing world and how to offer solutions to them. If Nigeria and all other African nations desire to become first world nations in the future, the bulk of our time must be invested in educating our people. Education is the passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today. Malcolm X. A nation with an outdated educational system can hardly become a developed nation. Such a nation will be full of university graduates who have beautiful certificates and curriculum vitae but with little or no practical skills. If people spend 4 or 5 years in universities only to graduate with little or no professional skills, they have simply wasted their time in those universities. That is the case with Nigeria and many other African countries. Most people graduate from the university only to become dependent on the government for jobs, and when they get none, they become idle for the rest of their lives. Why is it so? It is because our schools and universities in Africa perhaps do not teach people the necessary skills they need to become independent and self-sufficient. Our curriculum do not teach students how to create their own jobs, become self-employed, and become employers of labor. People graduate from schools in first world nations and they are able to have their own startups and contribute to economic growth and development. They are able to create their own businesses and companies based on the skills they have acquired. They are able to create their own inventions. But the reverse is the case for most African countries. In my opinion, it is a failed educational system that we have in Africa today. Again and again, universities have put a low priority on the very programs and initiatives that are needed most to increase productivity and competitiveness, improve the quality of government, and overcome the problems of illiteracy, miseducation, and unemployment. Derek Bach. How could people study agricultural science, graduate from the university, and not be able to start up their own agricultural plantations, poultry farms, and fish ponds, and instead are wasting time on the streets looking for jobs? I am amazed that most of our graduates are roaming the streets in search of white-collar jobs. What about the multitude of youths that studied business administration and management in the university, and yet cannot start up and manage their own businesses? Why do we have a lot of civil and construction engineers in our country and yet depend on Arabs and Chinese to build our bridges and construct our roads? Does that not tell you something about our educational system? Of course yes. It suggests to me that we need a total overhaul of our educational system. We must upgrade our curriculum to address the current challenges that we are faced with as a nation. People must use the time they have to learn skills and know-hows instead of just memorizing some theoretical concepts in order to pass exams. This is so that when they graduate they will be able to create value and get money for it and not need to wait all their lives for a government job. It is my belief that our educational sector must be more concerned about how to use time for human capital development than anything else. That is the key to building a first world nation. In conclusion of this chapter, I want to quickly remind you that we can become a first world nation by investing in human capital development, by restructuring our educational system to meet that task, and by organizing trainings, workshops, and seminars to teach people how to acquire skills, expertise, and know-hows in different aspects of life and nation building. In the next chapter, we shall discuss how each and every one of us should use time in order to make it productive. 1. To truly build a nation with a robust economy, we must invest in human capital development. 2. No nation becomes a first world nation without first developing its human capital. 3. Any nation that desires to become a first world and an economically prosperous nation must teach its citizens how to use their wealth of time to develop new skills and knowledge, and how to use these skills and know-hows to radically transform the nation's economy. 4. Africa is the least developed amongst the continents of the world because attention is not being given to the use of time for human capital development. 5. If we fail to use time to acquire knowledge, we will keep depending on other nations to help us with any little project we hope to carry out. 6. Education is the key to building and developing human capital. That is one of the secrets of first world nations building an effective educational sector. 7. If Nigeria and all other African nations desire to become first world nations in the future, the bulk of our time must be invested in educating our people. 8. It is my belief that our educational sector should be more concerned about how to use time for human capital development than anything else. For that is the key to building a first world nation.